Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the most recent album from Keith Urban called Ripcord. Now I've talked a fair bit about the thin line between pop music and country music, a divide between genres that to some isn't just about the music but ideology as well. The very idea that country could exist in the same space as pop with clean, polished tones, light subject matter, and touches of modern production, that is offensive to some people because it betrays country's commitment to history and authenticity, that deeply rooted sound. Now, I'm not one of those people, because like it or not, I think that pop country can be a workable subgenre. Just because the subject matter is lighter, the production is more polished, and the singers are prettier, doesn't mean that there can't be great music with strong melodies, good performers, and smart writing. Think Lucy Hale or Shania Twain in her heyday. Or on the flip side, you could have Keith Urban. And let's make no mistake here, ever since he came up in the same mold of the same producer as Rascal Flatts, he's been making very polished, very accessible pop country music. The big difference between him and Rascal Flatts is that he actually has charisma and better songwriters, and one isn't afraid to give his solid guitar work a little bit more room to breathe. I'm never gonna say he was an essential act in country in the 2000s, or that he didn't make very pop songs, especially on his 2013 album Fuse. And yet, keep in mind, when I covered that back in 2013, very early on this channel, I actually really quite liked that album, and for the most part, I still do. By keeping the melodies prominent and the percussion grooves breezy, even when they were electronic, the album was an easy, fun listen with some above-average songwriting that was a real pleasant surprise for me. Unfortunately, going into Ripcord, I had a lot more misgivings. Like it or not, pop music has gotten a lot more choppy and staccato thanks to the influence of trap, which has not helped the flow of a record like this, and the songwriting was only feeling more inane, lacking the subtle flourishes that gave songs on Fuse more personality, like Cop Car. I wasn't really wild about any of the lead-off singles, and seeing a Pitbull collaboration immediately threw up a red flag, but that being said, Keith Urban has earned a fair bit of goodwill with me, so even despite some pretty harsh critical reviews and some negative buzz, I decided to give this album a listen. So what'd I find? Honestly, very little, even by the ephemeral standards of pop country. Actually, that's not even quite true, because that would make the implication that this record is remotely country instead of a slice of acoustic touch pop music that wouldn't be out of place in, say, the late 90s. And make no mistake, there's a part of me that's more than a little bit peeved that this will inevitably get play on country stations because it's Keith Urban, despite being the furthest thing from country music. And yet, even if we choose to consider it just as pop, man, there's not a lot here at all. A record going for breezy appeal that ends up just feeling completely insubstantial. In other words, not good at all. So let's start off with what would normally be the biggest asset of a record like this, Keith Urban himself. As I said, this guy has real charisma and an infectious sincerity that can be easy to like. Even if he didn't write these songs, he's a believable presence. And yet, the spark doesn't really come through here in the same way. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the production, but for as much experimentation as there is here, Keith Urban doesn't seem to be throwing the same wide-eyed passion that he had on Fuse. And bizarrely, it doesn't seem to have a lot of chemistry with his guest stars either, with Pitbull delivering his verse with a little bit more reserve than he normally does, including a lyric about doing shots for the soldiers fighting for freedom that doesn't remotely fit in with his persona or the rest of the song. And then there's Carrie Underwood on The Fighter, and wow, you can tell she phoned this in, because there's no way in hell I'd buy her being even remotely vulnerable or scared enough that Keith Urban would be the one supporting her and providing comfort. And believe it or not, it ties into one of the bigger lyrical problems of this album, namely that none of it caters to Keith Urban's strengths as a performer. Putting aside the fact that he's nearly 50 and trying to sound like he's my age or younger, Keith Urban at his best has a bright-eyed energy that's heartfelt and sincere. Some of the reasons like Cop Car works so well on Fuse. But this record, it never really tilts into that as a strength. Maybe a little bit on Wasted Time or Worry About Nothin', probably the two decent songs on the record, but more this record plays towards a slinkier, sexier R&B and party jams, both which require a tightness and coolness in the writing and delivery that Keith Urban just doesn't pull off very well. It doesn't help matters that the writing can feel awfully sloppy at points. I've talked about the completely unconvincing checklist nature of the leadoff single John Cougar, John Deere, John 316 before on Billboard Breakdown, but then you got a stab at growing up that feels incredibly commercial on Boy Gets a Truck that tries to chain the chorus together with the last word of the first first line, lasting the first word of the next line, and the cadence feels rushed against that groove. I can go on about the lazy rhyming of the hook of Your Body, or how the pseudo-rap cadence is just a poor fit for Keith Urban's voice, but those are aesthetic quibbles. What really irked me about the writing was the songs that felt lacking in romantic nuance. And sure, Keith Urban has never been defined by nuance. Take Break on Me. Again, I've already talked about this song on Billboard Breakdown, but this Lone Star Come Cry to Me riff doesn't ring as romantic as Keith consoles this girl saying that she can shatter like glass against him. And it's not just here. Habit of You takes the titular line, makes it about a hookup that he likes, cause that's romantic, make a habit of somebody. And then there is Blue Ain't Your Color, where Keith gets drunk and tries to console a sad girl at a bar about a bad relationship that she doesn't need to be sad and be with that guy. Look, you're not being exactly subtle here. You're saying you're not trying to hook up, but again, you kind of are. Hell, that lack of subtlety might be the biggest reason why so many of these songs just don't stick with me. When the instrumentation is as chilly and desaturated as it is here, you need emotional nuance or a brighter demeanor to add life to these songs. And since we don't really have either of those, might as well talk about the production, I guess. Now, some credit must be given to Keith Urban for some decent guitar tones, at least a commitment to keeping good grooves thrumming beneath these songs. For as pop as this album is, he's at least keeping the momentum going. I can respect that. But here's the thing. When you have a song like Gone Tomorrow Here Today, which might as well have come from Robbie Williams in 1999 with the incredibly stiff drum programming, it's not a good sign when the bass line overwhelms any sense of instrumental melody outside of an incredibly thin banjo loop, some atmospheric synth, and a few jagged flashes of guitar that don't stick around nearly enough. But fine, even if that kind of works there for the Pitbull collaboration, Sun Don't Let Me Down, that punches up a mediocre guitar line and also adds this dinky little synth as punctuation, it's a lot less effective when we have songs that scream for brighter, more colorful textures. Wasted Time, biggest example. The rubbery, low synth, the program clap, even with the slightly brighter guitars and the breezy multi-tracking on the hook, it doesn't have that same warmth as even a track that's playing in the same vein like Good Time by Owl City and Carly Rae Jepsen. A lot of similar instrumentation, yet that song is so much better. Granted, that song really is a modern summer pop classic, but it highlights how cold so much of this album feels. The awkward blend of nasal backing vocals, clumsily blended guitars, and trap percussion on Habit of You. The faded melody against the acoustic groove on Getting in the Way. The disco guitar of The Fighter playing against the warping keys that never really pays off its chorus all that well. The brittle acoustic groove of Break on Me with a prominent bass melody that features some of the most poorly blended backing vocals I've heard in a long time. And Your Body trying its best to rip off Cheyenne with the louder guitar. And no, I'm not talking about the George Strait track, and that song does have a different title. I'm talking about the Jason Derulo song. Yeah, I'm not even kidding here. But it was the rougher guitar focus on Boy Gets a Truck and Worry About Nothing with those thicker grooves, the latter probably being the best song on the album, even with those limp Casio synths, that really crystallized what sound this record was trying for the most at its best. Kip Moore's Wild Ones. The same thicker grooves, the rougher guitars, and even though Keith Urban relies a lot more on drum machines, it could have worked, so why doesn't it? In a word, I think it's atmosphere. Kip Moore gave his melodies meat and room to ride off his grooves and swell within the mix, whereas so much of Ripcord seems to hem itself in, using reverb to give the illusion of depth even as so many of the melodies are thin and brittle and can't support it. It's awkwardly forcing something that should come naturally. And really talk about an apt metaphor for this album, because it's definitely not good. Forget pop country, even judging it as pure pop music, it's clunky, monochromatic, sloppily written and produced, really kind of bland when you get down to it, and it doesn't sound like Keith Urban's heart is much in this. For as much as Keith Urban has talked about spontaneity in the interviews talking about this album, to me it sounds like calculated desperation and trying to keep up with modern sounds, with 7 different producers trying desperately to make it work. And the sad fact is that it really doesn't. I wanted to like this as a guy who likes Keith Urban, but I'm sorry, it's a 4 out of 10 and I can't recommend this. Let's hope that Keith Urban can correct his trajectory and do it fast, because the winds of country are changing. They're not going to be tolerating this sort of pop country much longer, and really, I can see this getting blown away. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I came down pretty hard on this album, but I got the poll up here, so what did you guys think? You think I was too harsh on it, or was it really just as mediocre and bland as everyone expected here? Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. Just give me a little bit of time here. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.